The racists in the South, Democrats were happy to have their votes.
The civil rights chapter, I loved reading it. Eye-opening, jaw-dropping. And for me, reading it, growing up in a very urban area in Brooklyn, New York, and seeing how government policies have really shackled minority communities. And these are the same minorities, particularly blacks, who continually vote for Democrats. And they vote for Democrats because they think that Democrats have always been their party. They've always been looking out for them. And you're right, the folklore is that Democrats lost the South to Republicans because the Democrats stood on principle to oppose race discrimination, while the Republican Party pandered to racists in the South. I think it's funny you say the Republican Party pandered to racists in the South. No wonder why Democrats have been having a hard time in the South, because they carte blanche say all the Southerners are racist. But more importantly, it's historically so fallacious to say that Democrats had anything to do with civil rights.
Right. It's the opposite of the truth, and I go through the history of civil rights, and it was always Republicans, I mean, obviously starting with the Civil War, who were against slavery, against segregation. Then you go through all these congressional bills, the anti-lynching bills, the anti-poll tax bills, the pro-voting rights bills, and every year, 66, 67, 68, Republicans introducing these civil rights bills for 100 years, and Democrats voting against them. Now, I don't think all Democrats were racist back then, just as I don't think all Democrats today, deep in their hearts, are obsessed with killing the unborn. But they know that the segment of Democratic voters who were racist would vote in a block for the Democrats, the same way the pro-abortion ladies today will vote as a block for the Democrats. They're always leading the mob, whatever the mob is. And the racists in the South, Democrats were happy to have their votes. It was only when, because of Republican Voting Rights Act, blacks started voting in larger numbers that the Democrats even pretended to care about civil rights. And then, of course, it just became another racket.
Well, let's talk about Barry Goldwater, because it seems like the propagandizing started when Barry Goldwater opposed two provisions of the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Most people don't know that it was only two provisions.
Two provisions, you point out, even though he supported many other civil rights acts, and he was actually the founder of the NAACP in Arizona. As you point out. So how did this myth start, and how has it gained so much momentum?
Well, because it reflects favorably on the Democrats, so they say it 8 million times a day on TV and newspaper articles and magazine articles, many of which I quote. But I was always curious about that, the whole Goldwater thing. And I looked into it, and the '64 Civil Rights Act was the first civil rights act that involved private actors. It involved hotels and eating establishments, restaurants, private establishments, as opposed to government actors who were preventing blacks from voting, who were passing segregation laws requiring private establishments to maintain segregated establishments. Okay, so this is the first one that poses any constitutional problem. Still, yet and still, a majority of Republicans, about 80% in the House, 80% in the Senate, voted for the bill, only about 60% of Democrats. And this is when Democrats are starting to get worried about blacks voting and being able to vote them out of office. Barry Goldwater opposed it purely on constitutional grounds. Only the two provisions that applied to private actors. Other provisions of the bill he wanted to make stronger. Meanwhile, he desegregated Goldwater's department stores. When he was in charge of the Arizona National Guard, I think it was the Air Guard, he desegregated it before Truman even talked about desegregating the U.S. military. There was not a racist bone in his body. It was purely a pure constitutional argument. And the point I make is, I mean, I'm as a conservative, and especially in my generation, I'm just against race discrimination. After reading through the history of civil rights in this country, you become so enraged at the Democrats, I wouldn't care that it was a violation of the Constitution. It's about the way I feel right now about abortion. After all of their lying and twisting the Constitution, not letting us vote on abortion, and all of these babies being killed, if suddenly fetuses were allowed to vote and Democrats could see a way to lead them as a mob, and Roe v. Wade is overturned, abortion is banned, well, actually abortion is not banned, the Democrats would leap in, propose a federal law banning abortion. And you would have many pure constitutional conservatives saying, well, that's not an enumerated power. Congress doesn't have the authority to ban abortion. They have to do that state by state. And then Democrats would vote for it because they could not care less about the Constitution. And at that moment, they would claim that they were the ones who were always the pro-lifers with Republicans running out trying to slaughter babies.